Hello, my dear lore seekers. Welcome back to another evening of shared stories. Tonight, we turn our gaze away from the ancient castles and forest floors, and instead, we step into the fog-wreathed streets of a city waking up to magic. We journey back to a time of myth and shadow, to an age when healing was a wild and secretive art, whispered in back rooms and hidden behind closed shutters.
They mustn't know.
Settle in, quiet your mind, and let us explore the very foundations of magical medicine as we uncover the complete history of the brilliant, pragmatic, and legendary figure who built a sanctuary in a time of fear. The founder of St. Mungo's Hospital. Before we begin, if you find value in our stories, please take a moment to like and subscribe. Your support is what allows us to continue these journeys together. We appreciate it more than you know. And now, let's begin. Tonight, we are not just reciting dates and names. We are walking the history. We are going to breathe in the scent of antiseptic and steeping herbs. We are going to touch the cold stone of the original foundation and the red brick of the modern disguise. We are delving into the lore of healing. To truly understand the sanctuary that is St. Mungo's, we cannot start at the front door. We must start in the darkness that came before it. We must travel back, way back, to the 15th and 16th centuries. Imagine the world of that time. It was a landscape of danger. If you were a wizard in the 1500s, living in a small village in the rolling hills of Yorkshire, or the fenlands of East Anglia, your life was a precarious balance. Magical medicine in this era was entirely decentralized. It was a time of chaos. There was no central authority to turn to when a spell went wrong. There were no standardized textbooks on how to reverse a jinx that had fused your fingers together. If you contracted Spattergroit, with its telltale purple pustules and inability to speak, or if you splinched yourself, leaving half an eyebrow in one county and your nose in another, your survival depended entirely on luck. It depended on who you knew. In these days, healing was a cottage industry. It was the domain of the village healer, often a wise witch or wizard living on the very edge of the community, perhaps in a crooked house where the smoke from the chimney always curled in strange shapes. These healers brewed remedies in iron cauldrons that were as likely to explode as they were to cure you. They worked with what they had. Raw ingredients purchased from wandering apothecaries, jars of beetle eyes, bundles of dried nettles, and the spleens of newts. But having the ingredients and knowing the precise, delicate art of brewing them into a safe cure were two very different things. And then there were the barber surgeons. In the non-magical world, the Muggle world, barber surgeons were the terrifying figures you visited for a haircut or an amputation, often using the same sharp, rust-spotted tools for both. In the magical world, a similar class of practitioner existed. These were wizards who specialized in crude, physical magic. They were the ones you called in a panic for broken bones, or curse damage that required immediate, messy intervention. But their methods were brutal. We have dusty records from this era describing early bone knitting spells that were just as likely to fuse your joints together into a solid, unmoving block of calcium as they were to heal a fracture. It was a gamble. Every time you sought help, you rolled the dice with your life. But the biggest problem facing the wizarding world in this pre-hospital era wasn't just incompetence or the lack of standardized education. It was persecution. We must remember the atmosphere of the time. This period coincided with the rising tide of anti-witchcraft sentiment that swept across Europe and Britain like a fever. This was long before the International Statute of Secrecy was signed in 1692. Wizards and muggles lived side by side, elbow to elbow, albeit uneasily. When a wizard got sick, or when a magical accident occurred, it was incredibly difficult to hide. Imagine a young wizard who has come down with a case of Dragon Pox. Their skin turns a sickly, vibrant green. Pustules erupt. Sparks fly from their nose every time they sneeze. If a muggle neighbour sees that in 1550, panic ensues. They do not see an illness. They see proof of the devil. They see witchcraft. They see a reason to call the witch hunters. So, healing became a shameful, secretive act. Witches and wizards would suffer in silence behind locked doors rather than seek help, fearing that exposing their magical ailments would bring down the wrath of the local Inquisition. Families treated their own, passing down home remedies scrawled on scraps of parchment, a mix of genuine magical theory and total superstition. It was a lonely way to die. Into this world of fragmentation and fear stepped a man named Mungo Bonham. Now, you may know the name. Mungo Bonham is a figure that every wizarding child encounters, mostly because he is a famous healer featured on a chocolate frog card. You might have seen his picture, a man with a kind but stern face, perhaps holding a wand and a bone saw. But the man himself was far more complex than the brief biography on the back of a sweet wrapper.
Born in 1560, Mungo came from a pure-blood family that was well respected, but known for being practical. The Bonhams were not the flashy duelists who preened in the courts of power. They were not the high society politicians who whispered in the ears of kings. They were sturdy people. They were the people who got things done. From a young age, Mungo was obsessed with the boundary between life and death. There is a story, likely apocryphal, passed down through generations of healers, but charming nonetheless, that as a child, he accidentally turned the family Kneazle inside out while trying to cure it of fleas. A horrific accident, one that would make most children run away screaming. But not Mungo. Instead of panicking, the young boy reportedly sat down and spent 3 hours meticulously researching counter-transfigurations in his father's library until he managed to reverse the spell, saving the creature. This anecdote, whether fully true or embellished,
highlights the two qualities that would define his career: an intense, burning curiosity and nerves of absolute steel. Mungo attended Hogwarts, and while the history books do not record his house with certainty, many historians argue he fits the mold of a Hufflepuff due to his relentless hard work and desire to help others. Others argue for Ravenclaw, citing his innovative mind. Regardless of the colour of his tie, he excelled in potions and herbology. He didn't just follow the recipes written on the chalkboard, he tweaked them. He was constantly asking, why? Why does Dittany knit skin? Why does a bezoar neutralize poison? He wanted the underlying theory. He wanted to understand the mechanics of the magic. After leaving Hogwarts, Mungo did something unusual for a wizard of his time. He travelled. He didn't just tour the wizarding villages of Britain, he went further. He travelled to the sun-baked sands of Egypt to study with alchemists, learning about ancient preservation techniques and the magic of the body. He spent time in the freezing, wind-swept mountains of Tibet, observing how the Yetis dealt with the extreme cold and the magical flora that grew at high altitudes. When he returned to London in the late 1500s, he was a changed man. He carried a battered leather satchel filled with rare seeds, strange vials of shimmering liquids, and notebooks crammed with anatomical drawings. He set up a small practice in London, and very quickly he gained a reputation. He wasn't just a healer, he was a problem solver. If you had a curse that no one else could break, you went to Bonham. If you had grown a second head that was shouting obscenities at your mother-in-law, you went to Bonham. He had a bedside manner that was described as brisk but kindly. He didn't coddle his patients. He didn't offer them sweet tea and sympathy, but he didn't judge them either. And in an era where magical maladies were often seen as a moral failing or a sign of weakness, that lack of judgment was revolutionary. But Mungo's ambition went beyond a private practice. He was frustrated. He saw wizards dying of treatable conditions simply because they couldn't get to him in time, or because they were trying to hide their condition from their neighbours. He saw the fragmentation of knowledge. One healer might know the cure for a specific poison, but if they lived in Yorkshire and the patient was in Cornwall, that knowledge was useless. Mungo Bonham began to campaign. He wrote letters to the Wizards' Council, the precursor to the ministry. He held dinners with influential pure-blood families, arguing into the late hours over goblets of wine. He argued that the magical community needed a central repository of healing knowledge, a place where healers could be trained, where resources could be pooled, and where the sick could be protected. His arguments were met with resistance. It's too dangerous, people said, their voices hushed in fear. Gathering all the sick wizards in one place is just asking to be discovered by the Muggles. It will be a target. Others argued about the cost. Who will pay for the potions? Who will pay the staff? Why should I pay for the healing of a wizard I do not know? Mungo's response was characteristically pragmatic. He famously said, The cost of a hospital is high, but the cost of a dead wizard is infinite. In 1612, Mungo Bonham officially founded St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries. He was 52 years old. The founding of St. Mungo's was a pivotal moment in wizarding history. It predates the International Statute of Secrecy by 80 years. This is a crucial detail. When St. Mungo's opened its doors, it was operating in a world where magic was not yet officially illegal, but highly persecuted.
The location was the first major challenge. It needed to be central, accessible to wizards from all over Britain, but concealed. Mungo chose a site in the heart of London. At the time, London was a teeming, dirty, rapidly expanding city. It was a labyrinth of cobblestone streets and timber-framed houses. It was the perfect place to hide something enormous. If you put a magical castle in the countryside, people notice. If you put a magical building in a crowded city street, people are too busy watching their step to look up. The original building was not the red brick department store we know today. That came later, a renovation to keep up with the times. The original St. Mungo's was concealed behind the facade of a large merchant's warehouse, ostensibly used for storing wool and spices. It was a masterpiece of magical architecture. Bonham recruited the finest charms experts of his day to layer the building with muggle-repelling charms. But he went further. He implemented notice-me-not charms of such complexity that a muggle could lean against the wall of the hospital to tie their shoe and never realize the building was there. They would simply slide off the perception of the place, their minds refusing to acknowledge its existence. The funding came from a combination of Mungo's own savings and donations from wealthy families who owed him their lives. The Malfoys, the Blacks, the Longbottoms, names we recognize today, all contributed to the early endowment, securing private wings and specialized care for their kin. When the door is opened, it was chaos. There was no triage system, no departments, just a massive hall filled with beds and a small team of healers running from patient to patient. Mungo Bonham himself worked 18-hour days, sleeping in a small cot in his office, his hands stained with potion ingredients, his eyes red with fatigue. But slowly, order emerged. Mungo realized that magical injuries fell into distinct categories. You couldn't treat a dragon burn in the same ward as someone suffering from spattergroit. The risk of cross-contamination was too high, and the treatment modalities were completely different. This led to the departmentalization of the hospital, a structure that largely survives to this day. It was Mungo who coined the terms artifact accidents and creature-induced injuries. He was categorizing the chaos of magic. Mungo Bonham died in 1659, having seen his hospital become the cornerstone of the wizarding world. He didn't live to see the Statute of Secrecy signed in 1692, but his hospital was ready for it. When the wizarding world went underground, St. Mungo's was already a fortress of privacy. Let us now fast forward to the modern era. Let us walk through the hospital as it stands in the time of Harry Potter. The location has shifted to the department store, Purge Dowse Limited. The disguise is brilliant in its mundanity. A red brick, old-fashioned department store that looks closed for refurbishment. This is the perfect psychological barrier for muggles. It implies a boring commercial failure. There's nothing mysterious about a closed shop. It's just disappointing. Muggles walk past it without a second glance. To enter, as we know, one must speak to the dummy in the window. The dummy, a mannequin with peeling paint and the green nylon pinafore, is the gatekeeper. This is a fascinating piece of magic. It's likely a semi-sentient construct, imbued with enough intelligence to assess the intent of the visitor. It acts as a security filter. If a muggle were to talk to the dummy, perhaps a drunk passerby late on a Friday night, the dummy likely wouldn't respond. It requires the magical signature of a wizard, or at least the specific intent of seeking magical aid. When you step through the glass, you aren't just walking into a building. You are crossing a dimensional threshold. The interior of St. Mungo's is much larger than the exterior footprint of Purge Dowse. This relies on the undetectable extension charm, the same magic used on Hermione's beaded bag and the Weasleys' tent, but on an industrial, monumental scale. The atmosphere inside is distinct. It is described as busy, chaotic, and filled with strange sights. The reception area is a hive of habitat. We have the welcome witch, who sits at the caps. She is essentially the triage officer. Her job is incredibly difficult. She has to diagnose a patient within seconds of them walking in. Is that a jinx? A curse? Or a bite? Is it contagious? And direct them to the right floor. The Howth West is divided vertically, which is a common trope in magical architecture, similar to the Ministry of Magic. Let's take a tour, floor by floor, and explore the lore and the horrors hidden on each level. We begin on the ground floor. Artifact accidents. The sign reads, cauldron explosion, wand backfiring, broom crashes, and more. This is the front line of magical stupidity. This floor tells us so much about the day-to-day risks of being a wizard. Magic is dangerous. Objects are volatile. The Artifact Accidents Ward is constantly full of people who bought cheap cauldrons that melted, or second-hand wands that didn't align with them. One of the most common injuries treated here is spell ricochet. This happens when a wizard casts a spell in a confined space with poor aim. The spell bounces off a reflective surface or a shielding charm and hits the caster. It creates unpredictable wounds. Then there are the enchanted object injuries. We know from Arthur Weasley's work in the Misuse of Muggle Artifacts office that wizards love to enchant things they shouldn't. We can imagine patients coming in with teapots fused to their hands, or shoes that won't stop dancing, a variation of the Tarantalegra curse gone wrong. The healers on this floor have to be experts in counter curses and object disenchantment. They are essentially a bomb disposal unit. They have to neutralize the magical object before they can treat the physical wound. If a biting kettle is clamped onto a toe, you can't just pull it off. You have to convince the kettle to let go. There's a tragicomic element to this floor. It's where young wizards end up when they try to impress their friends, and where older wizards end up when they try to fix their plumbing with a wand instead of a wrench. It's noisy, it smells of smoke and ozone, and it is always busy. Moving up, we find the first floor, creature-induced injuries. The sign lists bites, stings, burns, embedded spines, etc. This floor smells of strange salves, burnt hair, and the musk of wild beasts. The waiting room is likely filled with people holding makeshift bandages over glowing green wounds or trying to suppress hives that are singing opera. The lore of this floor is dominated by the sheer diversity of magical beasts. We have the standard injuries: horclump spikes, bow-truckle gouges, small but prone to infection, and hippogriff talons. But then we have the serious cases: werewolf bites. We know from Remus Lupin's life that there is no cure for lycanthropy, but St. Mungo's plays a crucial role in managing the condition. When a victim is first bitten, the immediate treatment is critical. A mixture of powdered silver and dittany is applied to seal the wound and prevent the victim from bleeding out, though it cannot stop the curse from taking hold. The healers here are not just treating the body, they are counseling the soul, preparing the victim for a life of transformation and prejudice. Healers on this floor also deal with venom. The library of antivenoms at St. Mungo's is the most extensive in the world. They keep stocks of basilisk venom, extremely rare and dangerous, kept in stasis for research, and acromantula venom. A famous historical case from this floor involves Urquhart Rackharrow, a healer from the 1600s, and another chocolate frog card feature. He was the go-to expert for giant and troll injuries. Trolls are notoriously dirty fighters, and their clubs are often coated in substances that cause rapid necrosis. Rackharrow invented the scrubbing charm specifically for deep tissue cleaning, a spell still used by surgeons today to remove debris from wounds. This floor is also where you'd find Arthur Weasley in the Order of the Phoenix after he was attacked by Nagini. The healers here had to deal with snake venom that dissolved stitches. They had to think outside the box, trying a blood-replenishing potion every hour and eventually resorting to Muggle-style stitches, though they didn't work well, to try and close the wounds. It shows that even the experts are sometimes baffled by dark creatures. Let us ascend to the second floor, magical bugs. Contagious maladies such as Dragon Pox, Vanishing Sickness, and Scrofungulus. This is the isolation ward. The air here is likely filtered through heavy enchantment to prevent airborne pathogens from escaping. It's quiet, sterile, and terrifying. Dragon Pox is the big one here. It's the magical equivalent of smallpox or the flu, but with the added complication that the patient turns green and sparks come out of their nose. It can be fatal, especially to the elderly. We know that Fleamont and Euphemia Potter, Harry's grandparents, died of dragonpox. It's a reminder that even with all the magic in the world, mortality is still a reality. The cure for dragonpox is often attributed to Gunhilda of Gorsmore. The one-eyed witch statue at Hogwarts protects her secret passage. She was a healer who developed a cure, though likely not a total one, more of a treatment to manage the severity. Spattergroit is another nasty one mentioned in the series. Ron Weasley uses a ghoul with Spattergroit as his cover story in Deathly Hallows. It's a fungus that spreads over the skin, causing extreme lethargy and inability to speak. The treatment involves taking the liver of a toad, binding it to the throat, and standing naked in a barrel of eel's eyes under a full moon. This sounds ridiculous, and it highlights a key aspect of magical medicine, the line between potion and ritual. Some cures require specific atmospheric conditions to work. It's not just chemistry, it's symbolic magic. Then you have scrofungulus and vanishing sickness. These are maladies that defy Muggle science. Vanishing sickness is particularly existential. Parts of you just stop existing. The healers here have to be skilled in transfiguration to anchor the patient to reality. On the third floor, we find potion and plant poisoning, rashes, regurgitation, uncontrollable giggling, and more. This floor is herbology meets chemistry. It's where you go when you eat the wrong berries or brew your potion counterclockwise instead of clockwise. The interaction between magical plants and the human body is complex. Venomous tentacular bites, for instance, are treated here, often crossing over with the creature floor. But this ward is also for self-inflicted potion errors. We see in Chamber of Secrets with the polyjuice potion how easily things can go wrong. Hermione ended up in the hospital wing, but a more severe case would have come here. Imagine a wizard who tries to brew Felix Felicis, liquid luck, and gets the ratio wrong. Instead of luck, they might suffer from hubris overload, a condition where they believe they are invincible and try to walk through walls. The healers here are masters of the antidote. They rely heavily on Bezoar's, of course, strictly following Golpalot's third law of antidotes, which states that the antidote for a blended poison is equal to more than the sum of the antidotes for each of the separate components. This requires immense mathematical and magical precision. And now we reach the fourth floor. Spell damage. Unliftable jinxes, hexes, and incorrectly applied charms. This is, in my opinion, the most tragic floor. This is the Janus Thicky ward. It is named after Janus Thicky, a wizard who famously attempted to fake a Lethifold attack to escape his wife, but ended up leaving a legacy of researching mind-affecting magic. This ward deals with the long-term consequences of dark magic. This is where we find Gilderoy Lockhart, his memory wiped by his own backfiring spell. He is happy signing autographs, but he has no idea who he is. It is where we find Frank and Alice Longbottom tortured into insanity by the Cruciatus curse. The lore here is heavy. The healers on this floor, mind healers, are a specific breed. They aren't just fixing bodies, they are trying to stitch together fractured psyches. The definition of cure here is fluid. For the Longbottoms, there is no cure, only care. St. Mungo's provides a sanctuary where they can live with dignity, even if they cannot return to the world.
This floor raises deep ethical questions about magical medicine. If a mind is broken by magic, is the person still there? The healers of St. Mungo's operate on the principle that the soul remains even if the mind is damaged. They treat every patient with absolute respect. One of the fascinating aspects of this floor is the use of memory potions and pensives as therapeutic tools. Healers might extract traumatic memories to allow the patient to rest, or reintroduce memories slowly to rebuild a personality. It is delicate, dangerous work. One slip and you could wipe a mind forever. Finally, the fifth floor, visitors' tea room and hospital shop. This floor is a place of respite. It's where families go to wait for news, to buy gifts for the sick, or just to escape the clinical atmosphere of the wards. The tea room is likely filled with enchanted, soothing music and teapots that pour themselves, but the atmosphere is often tense. It's a room of waiting. The shop sells balloons that might sing "Get Well Soon" in a goblin's voice, or boxes of chocolates that contain endorphin-boosting fillings. It's a touch of normalcy in a place of magic and malady. So, who are these people in the lime green robes? Who chooses to spend their life battling magical diseases? To become a healer is one of the most rigorous career paths in the Wixotic world. It is arguably harder than becoming an organ.
It starts at Hogwarts. You need top grades, exceeds expectations, or outstanding in potions, herbology, transfiguration, charms, and defense against the dark arts. Why defense against the dark arts? Because you need to understand the dark magic to cure it. You need to know what a curse wants to do before you can stop it. A healer who doesn't understand the mechanics of a curse is just putting a bandage on a magical wound. The curse will eat right through it. After Hogwarts, there is no university. The wizarding world relies on the apprenticeship model. You apply to St. Mungo's as a trainee healer. This training lasts several years. We know from canon that there are different ranks: trainee healer, healer, and healer in charge. The uniform, lime green robes with an emblem of a crossed bone and wand, is iconic. Green is calming, associated with life and growth, contrasting with the red of blood and the black of dark magic. There is a distinct culture among healers. They view themselves as separate from the Ministry of Magic. While the ministry funds St. Mungo's, the hospital operates with a degree of autonomy. The healer's oath, a magical equivalent of the Hippocratic Oath, binds them to treat anyone in need. This has historically caused friction. During the wars, Death Eaters would sometimes seek treatment. A true healer treats the wound, not the politics. This neutrality is sacred, though often tested. Speaking of wars, the history of St. Mungo's is deeply entwined with the rise of dark wizards. During the Global Wizarding War, St. Mungo's was overwhelmed by Grindelwald's followers. The healers had to innovate rapidly. This era saw the development of many dark force defense healing techniques. But the Voldemort eras were even worse. The First War was a time of terror. St. Mungo's was a fortress. Patients were coming in daily with curses that defied logic. The hospital had to deal with the psychological toll on the community, opening emergency psychiatric wards for wizards suffering from paranoia. In the Second War, St. Mungo's became a silent battleground. We know that Bode, a ministry worker, was assassinated inside the hospital. This shows that the sanctity of the hospital was breached. Yet, the staff stayed. During the height of Voldemort's control, healers likely treated Muggleborns in secret, hiding them in supply closets. The ethos of Mungo Bonham, the cost of a dead wizard is infinite, held true. We can't talk about St. Mungo's without mentioning Dilys Derwent. She was a St. Mungo's healer from 1722 to 1741, and later became headmistress of Hogwarts. Her portrait hangs in the lobby and acts as a liaison. The portrait network is a vital part of the hospital's infrastructure, acting as an active communication system, the CCTV, and the messengers of the magical world. Let's look at some of the smaller, weirder details that make St. Mungo's feel real. Imagine the inventory. Barrels of Skelligro, which tastes disgusting. Crates of blood replenishing potion. Jars of Murtlap essence. The logistics are a nightmare. And the magical prosthetics. St. Mungo's handles enchanted replacements for limbs lost to dark curses. These aren't just wood. They are charmed to respond to the wizard's nerve impulses. There are even rumors of a closed ward, a basement ward below the ground floor for maladies too dangerous for isolation. Curses that are contagious on a spiritual level. As we near the end of our tour, we have to ask, how does magical healing differ from Muggle medicine? Muggle medicine is mechanical. Magical medicine is conceptual. It's about intent, energy, and the soul. When a healer mends a bone, they convince the bone that it was never broken. However, there is a hard limit. You cannot raise the dead. You cannot fully undo the effects of the darkest magic. St. Mungo's exists in that gap between anything is possible and some things are gone forever. It is a place of miracles, but also a place of acceptance. St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries is more than just a setting. It is a monument to the wizarding world's resilience. It started with one man, Mungo Bonham, who looked at a chaotic, dangerous world and decided to create a safe harbor. It survived the Statute of Secrecy, the witch hunts, and 2 devastating wars. It stands there today, in the middle of London, disguised as a closed department store. Thousands of Muggles walk past it every day, unaware of the dramas playing out just behind the glass. Unaware that a few feet away, a healer is battling a venomous tentacula bite, or a young wizard is waking up from a coma, or a family is saying goodbye. It is a place of lime green robes and bubbling potions, of tragic portraits and hopeful charms. It is the beating heart of the magical community.
And that, my dear friends, is where we will end tonight's video. Thank you for listening and for joining me on this journey into the hidden corners of our shared stories. I hope this deep dive into the lore of magical medicine has been soothing, interesting, and given you a new appreciation for the background details of this universe we love so much. Stay safe and sweet dreams.